mind who is like, the pinnacle of it all in between those hours, because it's just him. He's by himself. This is one of those few moments where it's just you are alone in your thoughts while you're doing
Right.
this and preparing as the 60
Yeah.
minute man. That's the stuff that you
Yeah.
know I'm intrigued
He
by.
always wanted to be the best. He
Yeah.
always wanted to be the best. Um, and his work ethic is just crazy. I mean, he's a freak of nature. He really is. He's not real.
Right,
Yes, he's
right.
not real. He truly is a freak of nature. Wrestling is a tough business, and I've never seen anybody navigate life and the wrestling business like Rick has. And yes, he's been married several times, and uh, but the normal human, I'm sure, could not endure all of the ups and downs that Rick has had, and he has navigated them so well. Despite the divorces and all the controversy, he's still the nature boy. He's going to be turning 66 years old later this month, and he's still the nature boy. He
Yeah.
will always be the nature boy.
And
Um,
I'm so glad he's back in WWE because not that I watch a tremendous amount of the TNA product, over the years, here and there, I came in and out and everything. And when I saw him over there, I'm like, hey, I understand. Man's got to earn a paycheck. Man's got to go in and do a job. And that's that. Sometimes it's not the most glamorous, but we lace up the boots, we go out there and we do it and everything. Um, I remember though watching, I was like, that man deserves better than doing this, smashing a can
yeah,
or whatever against his head until he bleeds when he doesn't need
yeah,
to. He's over already, and it's just the nature of this is this is how weak of a product we've got. We've got to let Ric Flair go out there in his 60s, smash something against his head till he bleeds, so that people will watch. And that,
yes, and I would. I believe me, I would. He used to, we used to have like a running joke. I love to see, I was an old school guy who loved to see bloody matches, right?
right.
And up until the time they started banning it, Rick would be, he would be talking. He says, "Well," he says, I'm grinding down this razor just for you tonight, Mike. Watch it." He said, he would say, "Sean just handed me a razor. Guess what?" I said, "All right, Nate."
We're gonna get
I
some color
loved it.
tonight.
I loved it, man. I told him the other night when he took the big hit from Big Show.
Yeah.
Said, "Man, I wish we could have had some color in that." I loved it. In the old days, you would have, right? A
True.
knockout punch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That.
yeah. And
Um.
they still talk so well about him. I was just looking at, I had when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago. Um, I had was at the show, so he didn't see the film. I had texted him. I said, "Yeah, JBL." I said, "Announcers couldn't stop putting you over last night. The greatest champion in the history of wrestling. JBL and Booker called you the greatest ever." And like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig when you and Hulk were in the ring. And he said, "Oh man, wow, that was so very nice of them." So he still appreciates being respected. That has been the hallmark of Rick over the years. The biggest thing with him is respect. If you respect him, you respect the business, you're in.
One of the I talked about one of the signature moments, like the signature moments of that WrestleMania match is when instead of Ric Flair getting tossed off the top rope, he finally nails it. The one just a beautiful small signature moment. And it was one of the last times we saw the big gold belt. Now since we've got a unified title, now that's no longer in the picture,
Right.
but to see one of the last images, and it's another tribute to a classic guy in John Cena in the fact that he gives Ric Flair that belt.
Yes.
That was really neat. That was neat to see because that belt is that is historical as that belt is. It doesn't belong on anybody else but Ric
No,
Flair.
it does not. It's Flair's belt.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And the amount of respect those guys in the locker room give Rick, still to this day, is incredible. Um, they show him such great reverence, as they well should. But that hasn't been lost, in today's wrestling. I mean, the guys just respect, and they grew, in Triple H. All those guys grew up on Nature Boy.
Right.
You know,
And all to a degree have wanted to be Ric Flair. Triple H certainly he doubled down on it hard in the early 2000s.
yeah, yeah, the blonde hair and all of
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff. They all had long blonde hair back then, trying to be the Nature Boy. you
You
know,
you talked once about The Rock. The Rock, that was a
oh,
discussion you guys had once, correct?
absolutely. When The Rock was Rocky Maivia and Rocky Sucks of Rocky Sucks fame, and I told Rocky, I said, I just you've got that it factor, and I think you're going to be a major star in this business one day. At the time, I didn't know he was going to be a major motion picture star, but I knew he had it, what it took to be a star in the wrestling business. And he said, well, I had just gone into talk into Vince's office the other day to kind of tell him what I'd like my character to be like. And I told him I wanted to be a poor man's Nature Boy, you know, not wearing as stylish of clothes and, not quite as brash and cocky. But I wanted to, I know I could never be another Nature Boy, but I'd like to be a poor man's version of a Nature Boy. And that's kind of where he took his character and became so successful. So, a lot of the successful people in the business today, when they first started out, they wanted to be not like Mike. They wanted to be like Rick.
That's a good point. And the fact is, like when he would, when it comes to the microphone, obviously, like when promos, Ric Flair's in a class of his own, like a guy who could go out there and crush it. You've said it, one take, Rick, he could go out there and do it, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, I've seen him back in the old days when they used to do hours and hours of promos for all of the cities around the territory and localizing each one. I mean, guys would stumble. I mean, it would be 3 takes, 4 takes, on, and it would. But Rick, I've never seen Rick do a second take. Rick could go 2 straight hours and just not even flub out the line, and just when that red light was on, I mean, Rick was in his element. He just fantastic, and the only guy I could compare him to in later years that could do that sort of thing would be The Rock.
yeah.
On the mic, just incredible.
Yeah, that when it goes back to earlier we were talking about when with Roman Reigns, like during his injured time, what would have been good was to try and get better mic work out of him during that period. And that goes back to when Steve Austin had his neck broken at the right is when it's about to explode and he's going to be white hot if he wasn't already there already. But when he was on the verge of making that title run, the thing that was a blessing in disguise there was the fact that you had a guy who might have been injured, but now we still get to see him on TV and he gets to develop his character more outside of wrestling, just talking on the mic, and that's something that would have served that man a lot last year, is if they would have been able to. And God forbid we would have gotten more of those bad promos, but maybe if obviously the process to get him out there would have been a little different. But it's a credit though. It's like I said, there are very few guys I think that could go out there and just nail it, and then that's it, one take and we're done and get out of there. Even nowadays, you can certainly tell when as it is scripted or even bullet pointed to an extent where you have to follow these guidelines. You can tell where some people get the look on their face like, oh God, I'm too far off the tracks. I don't know how to get back to the main purpose of this promo. I've gone off script here and I don't know how to get back. You see that so often nowadays, and it's hard.
And what was so cool in the old days that guys like Rick made up their own. There was no script to it.
Right.
They just winged it. They made up their own. I saw so many great promos, and I still talk to some of the old guys who are still around. I said, "Do you remember when Rick cut that promo on you?" And they would laugh. I told Tiger Conway Jr. about a year ago, when they had that little feud going in the mid '70s, when Rick was pretty new to the business in the area. He he did this promo once where he said, "Tiger Conway Jr." He said, he said you need to learn to respect me, Tiger Conway Jr. He said, look at all of the things I've done for you. He said, I even got you a job at the Pancake House here in Charlotte, Tiger. And I told him, he burst out laughing. He said, he never did get me that job. But just stuff like that where he winged it and say such great things, you know. Some things, granted, that would be probably politically incorrect today.
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, and you know, I even gotten a little heat when WCW had standards and practices, you know, with
Right.
really monitoring what they said. And Rick would, you know, he wouldn't have any script, and he was doing this deal with Ernest Miller, and he called him Little Black Sambo,
Oh, geez, yes. I remember when
and
that was, yeah.
and he got some heat over that. But you know, it wasn't anything that he wasn't doing, you know, like years before, you know, a decade or two earlier, and he didn't understand it. And I said, Rick, you know, you better watch that stuff. And he said, well, Mike, he said, he's a character, he's a Disney character, right? I didn't think there's anything wrong with that. So, you know, it's sort of an old school mentality that you just can't use today.
Right. Yeah, it's and that's with it being so corporate, that's why it's like, okay, here's the script. You got to follow it because we're afraid if you stray off course. You know, not all of them are going to I think you know, the pipe bomb was unique. You know, it didn't like the thing was like it for a lot of people, if they do that, it may go so terribly bad. I think in their eyes, that's why it's like, okay, if we at least keep them here, we know there's an acceptable range of failure here.
Yeah.
But if
exactly.
if you turn somebody loose who has, you know, it could be far worse, you know. And you know, and that's the flip side to it. I know a lot of people just will say, oh, well, they just need to remove all scripts altogether. Well, maybe not, because not everybody can go out there and just, you know, be able to speak from the heart and harness it in a way that can, you know.
Oh, so many of them can't, and then some of them might be able to, but like you said, they're scared to let them go out there, so they give them a script, and it's nowhere near their real character. Right. You know, like case in point, Shelton Benjamin.
Oh,
Shelton was one of the funniest guys around, but when you put him in a ring and gave him a scripted interview, I mean, it was horrible, you know, and that's one reason he didn't take off like he could have in WWE. He just was, you know, they overly scripted him. If Shelton could have been himself, had everybody in the building laughing, you know, he was a real funny guy. So, you know, some it helps, some it does not, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things, and you know, I guess it was on Punk's DVD where they talked about, it's like, yeah, we're just gonna let you go air out your grievances. It's like, I wonder when the next time where someone's gonna get that spot nowadays when they're breaking down the show backstage. It's like, what am I doing tonight? Well, you get to go out and air your grievances, and we'll
oh no, we might not see that again anytime too soon.
And that was the thing, like, you know, it seemed like a brief little summer there. Everybody was starting to look towards wrestling again, just for a little bit. Everyone was really, really excited, and that's when, of course, for whatever reason, you know, it storyline wise just didn't make sense. You have Triple H go over on Punk, and then it kind of killed it all in one little swoop. It seemed like.
Yep.
That was unfortunate. To kind of bring it, all right, to round third, coming home here on this. For me, like we talk about Ric Flair's match with Shawn Michaels, the end of it, the finale, that whole ride, for the last ride of Ric Flair, was very emotional. No doubt about it for you, obviously, being that you have followed him for so many years. But to look at wrestling as a whole, I know for me, with the answer to this, when I talk about the most emotional moment I've had watching wrestling was when Hulk Hogan against The Rock in Toronto, the moment he kicks out of the rock bottom and he starts hulking up. And I've asked many guys of my generation this, and it's always the same. It's the one man tears moment where everybody, for whatever reason, no matter what, starts to get tears in their eyes, because it's like you're reconnected to something from childhood, and it's beautiful. For you, Mike Mooneyham, as a guy who has seen all of wrestling all over the years, what has been the most emotional moment you've had watching a wrestling match?
Oh, I can tell you without a doubt, it was, and it wasn't as much emotional as it was. You know, you want to stand up. Well, I did. I stood up, pumped my fist, and I said, yes. That's a moment for me, because I've been around so long. You know, I usually don't get many of those moments these days. But back in the late '90s, when Eric Bischoff was in charge and he had fired Rick, you know, and in Greenville, South Carolina, at the Bilo Center,